Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our news in brief. President Bashar al-Assad received a letter from Sultan Qaboos bin Saeed of Oman on the latest developments in the region, especially in Yemen and Libya. The letter was delivered by Youssef bin Alawi, Foreign Minister of Oman, who was received by President al-Assad this afternoon. The meeting focused on the situation in Syria. President al-Assad reviewed with the Omani Foreign Minister the latest events in Syria, especially what the armed groups have been carrying out in terms of killing and terrorizing the Syrian people in order to destabilize the country. President al-Assad expressed his belief in the ability of the Syrian people to overcome this crisis and emerge stronger and more unified. The president also briefed bin Alawi on the current reforms in Syria. For his part, bin Alawi expressed his country's full support of these reforms, stressing his country's rejection of any attempt to target Syria's stability. To express their national loyalty and rejection of foreign intervention in Syria's internal affairs, hundreds of thousands of Syrian citizens raised the largest Syrian flag, which is 2,300 meters long and 18 meters wide, on Al-Mazza highway. This was in response to a campaign launched by Syrian youths to represent 23 million Syrians. The flag was a gift to our great martyrs and to President Bashar al-Assad. The campaign began with the national anthem and observing 1 minute of silence to honor the souls of our martyrs. It was also an expression of national unity and rejection of all attempts of foreign intervention in Syria's internal affairs. The flag will be raised in tours covering all Syrian governorates. Then it will be hoisted over Qasiyun mountain. It will not be brought down till the liberation of the Syrian Golan in order to be raised over its soil. A new mass grave containing bodies of a number of security forces and policemen was discovered today. The martyrs were savagely killed by members of the armed terrorist groups in Jisr al-Shughur. Sana correspondent in Idlib said 7 bodies were found in the area of Al-Abyad River in Jisr al-Shughur. He added that the bodies, which were taken out of the mass grave, were mutilated and cut into pieces by the armed terrorist groups and thrown into a dumping area. Earlier, the bodies were thrown into Al-Abyad River. He pointed out that armed groups prevented local residents from taking the bodies out of the river and told them that only the armed groups have the right to dispose of the bodies because they are the ones who killed them, and insisted on throwing their bodies in a dumping area and burning some of them. He said correspondents of more than 20 mass media and news agencies saw the mass grave and filmed it. They also met the doctor who confirmed that the bodies are 10 to 20 days old and date back to the time before the Syrian army entered Jisr al-Shughur. Meanwhile, life is back to normal in the areas that had been protected by the army in Jisr al-Shughur and its surroundings. An official military source has said that the army and security units continued their task in chasing the remnants of the armed terrorist gangs and the areas around Jisr al-Shughur in order to enable the citizens to return to their homes, which they had left in a bid to avoid the terrorist acts of death and destruction at the hands of those terrorist gangs. Many citizens had already started coming back home as law and order were maintained after purging the area of the armed terrorist groups. The wounded military and security men in the military hospital in Aleppo described the massacres committed by the armed terrorist gangs in Jisr al-Shughur and the creation of general panic there. These terrorists used various kinds of weapons, snipers, and used children as human shields.
There were children in front of us, so we couldn't open fire. This cost us some casualties. However, the children were removed from the scene, and we continued our task in the right way.
We came under an ambush, and I was hit.
Near Ariha, we came under an ambush, and I was hit with a bullet in the chest.
Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has reiterated Russia's firm stand in rejection of any UN Security Council resolution on Syria, affirming that the Syrian army is facing armed gangs and saboteurs and that no state can be tolerant with armed rebels. Syria's representative to the UN office in Geneva, Ambassador Faisal Hamwi, called upon the Human Rights Council and the High Commission of Human Rights to shoulder their responsibilities and to condemn the crimes and violations of the Israeli forces of occupation and the occupied Arab land if they wanted to safeguard their credibility and reputation as international bodies to achieve justice and to redress the victims of violations. In his address to the Human Rights Council yesterday, Mr. Al-Hamwi stressed the importance of rejecting Israel's threats and terrorist practices. Israel has committed massacres that were described by many UN observers as crimes of war and crimes against humanity. He called attention to the fact that these Israeli violations in the occupied Golan and Palestinian lands come against the background of very serious developments, particularly after Israel killed 20 Syrian, Palestinian and Lebanese citizens and wounded more than 150 when they were commemorating the anniversary of Al-Nakba last May. Israel then committed another massacre, killing 25 citizens and wounding more than 400 others on the anniversary of the Israeli aggression on the Arab nation on June 5th. This massacre was state terrorism. None of Israel's supporters called for any special session to condemn this crime. Al-Hamwi also underlined Israel's systematic violation of human rights in the occupied Golan. Innocent civilians, students, press reporters and farmers are detained under inhuman conditions, leading to their illness and eventual death under the eyes of the Red Cross. With this, we end our news and brief. Thank you for listening. Have a good evening.